Tuesday, the 16th of January. Matt Neverett here at Steve Cofield. Another UNLV All Access as we do it on the morning of the UNLV at Boise game. Matt, what's going on?
Hey, hanging out in sunny Las Vegas. How's the weather in Boise?
Let's see what it is right now. Is it 8?
You get cold and colder this time of year out there, so I wonder which of the two it is.
Yeah. 9 degrees. 9 degrees up from 3 this morning, so lovely. Lovely.
Brisk.
All right, well, they're going to get the Rebels will get a cold greeting inside whatever they call their arena, Extra Mile, I think it is, convenience store, so we gave them a free pop there. I don't know how big the crowd is going to be. We've got to check into it later in the afternoon because late games here, which is a 7 o'clock time, our start, I swear 8 o'clock games, anywhere in the Rocky region, the crowd's down like 30%. It's very weird.
That's just kind of what it seems. And, it's all based on the national TV schedule, so not surprising, especially given the fact that every Mountain West Conference game was picked up nationally this year. And this one would have been anyway. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see. You've been there before. That's an arena and a campus that I've never been to. What is it usually like, and what's the craziest atmosphere that you've seen there?
I think it was a couple of years ago. It was pretty freaking loud. It was probably the biggest crowd they had for a game, maybe a little over 7,000. I think the building can hold 12.5, but there's almost no one ever in the upper regions. And like I said, most of the time I've been here, it's been weekdays, so the crowd has been just kind of so-so, which is really mysterious for as passionate as they are about the football team, that the basketball team hasn't picked up more momentum. I mean, the attendance is good. They've got money coming in, but I don't know. It's always been weird, I guess. In some places, when you are a football school, you're mostly a football school.
And if you would have told me that there would be one school in the Mountain West that would have a mostly, if not all, blue court, and it would not be Boise, I would be shocked. That San Jose State has that abomination of a floor.
I like that floor. What are you talking about? It's great. Very distracting. Very distracting. All right, well, let's get into this game. First of all, we can look back, and one of the main themes of media availability was the recent play of one Rob Whaley.
Yeah, no, but Whaley has been really fun to watch, and it was a guy that at the beginning of the year, all of a sudden, I guess from the beginning of the year till now, has been a really big, almost transformation, almost in real time with his productivity, his energy on the court. He's been really fun to watch as of late.
Yeah, and most of it for him. And, I had talked to him for a lengthy one-on-one back before the Dayton game, and then it got canceled. But he openly talks about his mental state. So the other day he talked about seeing one of the mental advisors at the school about every 2 weeks or so to get his mind right. But most of it for Rob is just playing with confidence. I'm telling you, confidence is such a big thing with several players on this team. And he said the other day, he just got to relax. Like, don't put so much pressure on himself. It's probably good too that he's instilled a little bit of confidence in Kruger so that when he makes a mistake, he's not off the floor for multiple minutes after that. But I mean, the way he can defend bigs because of his girth at 265 pounds. And then the other thing, I think it's a real weapon when you have another kind of jumping jack. He's 265, yes, but he's kind of a jumping jack in the lane. And the ferociousness, with he's been attacking the rim of late, that can only help. That's a little intimidating.
Oh, very much so. And he really didn't bust it out until the end of the non-conference slate. But yeah, some of these ridiculous dunk attempts that are almost an intimidation factor. You see a guy that big going up, and it's not like he's standing under the rim and just trying to go up there and jam it with two hands. He's running up Michael Jordan style from the free throw line and trying to go right on top of guys. So it's been fun to watch. I think for me, the biggest development for him was in the beginning of the year when he would get the ball, you could see the eyes light up, and he was just trying to figure out what to do with it. And when he would put the ball on the floor, there were a ton of mistakes. And he's cleaned a lot of that up. He's been a lot more efficient, although I'd like to see him take it to the rack more. There was a couple of times in the 2 games last week against New Mexico and Utah State where he passed up wide open layups to be a distributor, dish to a teammate with the wide open 3. And both of the instances that I'm thinking of specifically, his teammate drained the 3, which made him look really good and got him another assist. But there's a couple of times it's like, Rob, you're right there. No one's there. Go up and just lay it in. You don't have to jam it every time. You can lay it in. As a guy who's familiar with layups, I'm all for a good easy layup. But the big thing for me too, especially as of late, was that game against Utah State. He had 10 and 7 at the half. And he really didn't. He added a point and a rebound in the second half. So you'd like to see that production stretched out over both halves. But all of a sudden, I remember looking over at the stats at the halftime, being like, "My God, he's got 10 and 7 at the half. This is a guy who could barely get on the floor 2 months ago."
Yep, and they need it. They need his minutes defensively. There's going to be games where Caleb Boone gets some silly fouls and gets himself on the bench in the first or maybe even part of the second. So they need the depth, and I think Isaiah Cottrell is available again tonight. He wasn't available 2 games back. He was available last game, played just a couple minutes. But I still think he has a chance to get back in the rotation too. It's just a matter of playing as hard and really imposing his size. He's the biggest guy on the team at 6'10 and 240. So I think he's still going to get a couple of minutes. So we've talked repeatedly, Matt, about and this is what happens throughout a season. You change your mind and who the best team in the Mountain West Conference is. And I've stayed on course here. I think it's Boise. That doesn't mean that this game is not a winnable game, because I don't think the top of the Mountain West Conference down to UNLV is a big stretch. Obviously, we've seen UNLV play 30 good minutes against San Diego State and get a win, and then in some people's mind get robbed of a win in the next one. Listen to Kevin Kruger here talk about their point guard. So Shaver's finally gone. They brought in a kid from LA, a veteran player in Roddy Anderson, and Kruger answered about what the skill set is of one Roddy Anderson.
When we talked about preparing for him, of course, first and foremost, stopping the ball in transition, and he's the large reason of that. Finding Rice, finding Agbo, finding those shooters in transition can be is definitely a priority when you play Boise. But then at the same time, I think he's found a really great kind of role for him in terms of he'll take layups and he'll put pressure on the rim and on the defense, and then he does a good job sharing if he doesn't have that. And I think that's what makes guarding teams in transition difficult, is when you got a guy like Anderson that can push it and knows when to go, knows when to stop, knows when to find people, and that's why that's certainly a priority for us.
So I'll say this: I think that was a really nice way of saying they're good at point guard, but they're not as dangerous at point guard, because Roddy Anderson simply doesn't shoot. He's not an offensive player, and yeah, if he gets downhill and he gets an opportunity, maybe, but Shaver was a really, really good player. So their backcourt is different. I thought Jace Whiting actually would win more of the time over Anderson. He's another point guard, but I think last time out, it was something like 32 minutes and 8 minutes, or 34 and 8 minutes between the two of them. So we'll see what they have at point guard, but it's definitely different than it was with Shaver, who seemed to always make free throws when it counted the most, and when it was go time in the final minutes of some close games, he generally got it done.
Definitely. And I thought it was an interesting point, too, where Coach Kruger kind of slipped in talking about the play in transition. I thought that he made it a point in the lead up to the Utah State game, especially, to highlight how strong they were in transition. I don't know about you, Steve, but I thought that UNLV really handled them very well in transition. There was not very many breakaway opportunities, maybe one or two that come to mind after watching that game. This is a UNLV team that defends in transition well, because they've got a bunch of guys that can guard multiple positions. So it's not like, you need Justin Webster back there. You need Rob Whaley to get back there. You need one of the Boones to get back there. You've got Luis Rodriguez, who can guard 1 through 5. You've got both Boone brothers who can guard basically 1 through 5 as well in a pinch. They have done a great job, UNLV has, in defending the transition. And so I think that they are apt to play well against teams that run a pretty high tempo because of that. And they've seen a lot of different styles, both in the non-conference and now in the Mountain West slate of action. So I think that defensively, this UNLV team is one that's almost a chameleon. They can kind of blend to the style of whatever the other team is. And, if you have one less shooter to worry about defensively, if you don't have to worry about a point guard firing up 3-pointers over DJ's head, that gives you a benefit. And it gives you the option to play different styles of defense, especially in a game on the road against a really tough team.
So with Shaver gone, some of the offense has now switched to the front court, and they have a new front court player, Omar Stanley, in from St. John's. And here's Kruger talking about what the offense looks like is a little bit different, because in the past they ran a lot of it through Tyson Degenhart, who is back for seemingly what feels like his 15th year.
Are they different offensively now with Stanley and Degenhart's still around, but they ran a lot of offense through Degenhart, so do they look a little different?
A little bit, but it's kind of still very aggressive, still very physical. They do a great job of sharing the ball, playing off each other. It's a hard team to prepare for in terms of sets and actions, because they do such a good job of maybe not having the exact set for this shot at this time, but then getting into ball screen action, getting into post action, and playing from there. But they run a lot of really good sets. They set picks really well. They set guys up really well. But even if you guard that stuff well on film, it seems though that they do a really good job of after the play, just kind of the continuing of the play, getting it in and out of the post, setting and using good screens, and kind of making plays for each other from there.
Scary good offense up front. Agbo's more of a three-point shooter. Degenhart can fire from deep, but hasn't been super reliable the last season or so. And then Stanley's kind of the X factor because he's come in and he's been averaging double figures in Mountain West Conference play. So you talked about the defense in transition. The defense in the post and on pitch outs is going to be really important.
Especially, yeah. And that just kind of comes down to, you hear assignment football, assignment basketball, and just being able to, as I kind of alluded to, being a chameleon. We're seeing a lot of switching on the pick and roll game because they've got a lot of guys who can guard multiple positions on the defensive side of the ball. And I think in this one, the fact that Omar Stanley typically finds himself in foul trouble lends me to believe that they're going to be really aggressive down low. They're going to try to take it to the rack and try to get both him and Degenhart in foul trouble early, because that's the way that they're going to be able to win this game, is by getting one, if not both of them, on the bench, off the floor, and let UNLV kind of do what they want offensively. This isn't a Boise State team either, Steve, just looking at the numbers, that dominates the glass, and neither is UNLV by any stretch, really. But I think it's going to be, something's got to give. Someone's got to win the rebounding advantage here. And while Boise State has the two studs in Stanley and Degenhart in the front court, I think if you can get either one of them in foul trouble, UNLV has done a great job of positioning themselves in the rebounding advantage. And I think that's something that they can take advantage of towards the later half of this game.
X factor in this game as well off the bench. I won't use the term X factor again, but Cam Martin, if he does play, is a pretty good player, averaging 6 and 5 off the bench. And he's a guy who actually went to Kansas as a high profile Division II transfer. UNLV tried to get him that year. He went to Kansas, and he's just been off injured, but he's back for another year with Boise. Can we go back to a couple of stories? First of all, what was your take on the end of the Utah State game?
So I was there. I had to leave actually about at the 12-minute mark, which is, just from looking back, about when things started to kind of go south. So I'll take, hand up. I'll take whatever blame you want to throw at me for that one. I had to go to the Henderson Silver Knights game with my dad. They were doing a Las Vegas Thunder reunion, and I was his chauffeur that day. So that was my excuse for having to leave. But going back and watching it, I've watched it a number of times on social media and on the replay of the game. I will say, for UNLV, leading wire to wire to put yourself in that spot to give Utah State an opportunity, obviously not ideal, and something that I'm sure we what was talked about throughout the week, because the difference between the first half and what we saw in the second half was a stark contrast. I mean, they went all out in the first half. They put up 47 against Utah State, who a lot of people believe is the top team in the Mountain West. They've got the nation's longest winning streak, and they went out and were winning 47-40 at the half. In regards to that play at the end, I won't even talk about the out of bounds situation and that whole replay review, because I didn't see it, and obviously there's not going to be highlights of that shit around, so I didn't get to see it as much of that. So I'll leave that out of it. Even you never really hear this. I would have fouled up 4. In that situation with Utah State coming back, and I know that's kind of a faux pas. I know that's not the common strategy in that situation, but with a team like that was coming back, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country, I think in that situation, let's just play hypotheticals here, Cofield. You got 10 seconds left. Here comes Utah State down the floor. You foul them with 8 seconds left. They were in the 1-and-1 at that point. Let's just say they make both. You're up 2 with 8 seconds left and the ball. As long as you get that inbound pass in, UNLV was in the double bonus. Then you can take 2 free throws. Then it's a 2-possession game. Then you're taking an extra 4 or 5 seconds off the clock. So it's not common to really ever see fouling up by 4. But for me personally, after looking at it and thinking about it, I kind of think that's what I would have done. Obviously, I'm not in the coaching shoes, and that's with enough time and replay reviews after the fact to kind of come to that decision. I think that what was the guy's name? Great last name was. it's so different for me too, by the way, preparing to watch these games as a fan versus as an announcer. I kind of look at them through two different lenses. But if he's running down the floor, he runs into Caleb Boone's back. He's got 50 pounds on Caleb and goes to the floor. And my last point about that was it wasn't either referee that was level with him on the perimeter that made the call. It was the furthest away official on the baseline with a bunch of bodies guarding. And again, obviously we have the benefit of being able to slow it down and watch it and take a look at it after the fact. But it just seemed like a box out with some incidental contact to me. Obviously, I think most UNLV fans are going to agree with that, but at least just looking at it, that's kind of what I saw. And again, I'll end it with what I started it with. If you're UNLV and with the way that game went, you cannot put yourself in that kind of a situation late.
Yeah, too many easy trips to the bucket for Osobor. Could not defend him going to his left. There were too many feeds that were really easy to Osobor down the stretch. There was a layup with 30 seconds left. It was basically uncontested, and it was really fast. That was disappointing. And the other thing is you got to make your free throws, right? Got to make your free throws. So tough loss, but they kind of put themselves in a close position to potentially lose. Now, everyone around the program will be like, no, that's ridiculous. So, a terrible call, two terrible calls down the stretch enabled that whole thing. But, when you're up 55-43, and, at that point, extend the lead, put together some more good defensive trips, and you're not in that position. It's doesn't feel good afterwards, but there are other reasons aside from the calls.
Well, and credit to Danny Sprinkle and company as well. I mean, what they've done, not only in the recruiting game, returning absolutely 0 minutes from last year and doing what they've done this year, phenomenal. But then in a bubble with that game in particular, some of the adjustments they made were phenomenal. And the second half was a completely different game than the first half for both teams.
Yep. No, whatever it was, the 1-3-1 that they were kind of extending out even further, that changed everything offensively for UNLV. There, you could see their brains were really working to try to figure it out. And the one spot they could get it to was the baseline, but then they didn't hit a lot of their baseline threes. They never really got the ball to the middle of the floor, near the free throw line in some open space. So that was another thing. And believe me, there's going to be some scout on that where other teams that every once in a while will use a 1-3-1 are going to use a 1-3-1. Actually, San Jose State comes to mind because they can play Tibet Gorner, their 6'9" player, way out top and run a 1-3-1. So I thought that was a really big part of the half. And yeah, Danny Sprinkle, cool under fire, was trying to kind of get a look on him during the game, doing the sidelines. He really never got super emotional, demonstrative, and he coached him right back into the game. And I mean, the other thing we have to give him credit for, that's an entirely new team. And yeah, he did have Osobor at Montana State, but I mean, some of the finds, Ian Martinez, man, when that guy got it going from 3-point territory, I mean, he's tough, like off the dribble against 6'5" defenders, and he's still going up and over them. So really impressive play. They have two great players, and they've got a good supporting cast. Yeah,
and they're a legitimate team that has a chance to win at least a couple of tournament games. And they've got size, they've got shooting, they've got great coaching. The turnaround in Logan in such a short span of time is indicative of the style of college hoops these days. But Danny Sprinkle playing the game and doing it just as good as anybody in the country. I mean, he's a legitimate, at least at this point, in my eyes, National Coach of the Year candidate, at least a finalist, right?
No doubt at 16-1. Yeah, I mean, and if he goes, if they get 12 wins in conference, I mean, they're that impressive, because I don't think there's a team in this conference that's going to go 14-4. I think there'll be a 13, a log jam at like 13-12. No, he's done an amazing job, and it's the face of the program is a lot different than it's been as well. It doesn't seem like it's led by local 4- and 5-year vets from the state of Utah, and it's not. So he made some bold changes there in terms of the culture and the look of the team at Utah State. So what's going to happen tonight? What's your prediction?
Well, I'll be really interested to see, and this is a point that I brought up to a couple folks yesterday. If you're Boise State, you've got some really good game tape on UNLV playing at just about at their best over the last two games. I mean, this New Mexico team that they beat on Tuesday, just as good as any team in the conference, and they could beat any team in the country with their skill. And then you've got a Utah State team, again, that a lot of folks think might be the best team in the conference that came in, struggled, made certain very specific adjustments, and then came back to win that game, whether or not it was official aided. Boise State's got some really good UNLV game tape and a lot of different types of looks against different types of defenses to kind of go into this one. And as I said, this Boise State team is not one that dominates the glass. They do shoot better than UNLV from outside. So I think that the 3-point advantage in this one will likely be who wins the game is who can be more efficient from beyond the 3-point line. We didn't really see an efficient or even a great shooting day from Keelan Boone against Utah State. I think if they can get him going, especially with some open looks early, he can really set the tone on both sides of the ball. He's really unique in that sense that his 3-point shooting can kind of propel the defense of the rest of the team because they get back in the half court on defense so quickly afterwards. It's going to be about the front court for Boise State offensively. If UNLV can guard Degenhart and Martin, and as I mentioned earlier, get them into some foul trouble early, I think it's going to be a physical game one way or another. I do think this one's going to be close, regardless of a point spread, regardless of what anyone thinks. I think that right now, even with Boise State, in your eyes, Steve, being the best team in the Mountain West, UNLV has gone and shown that in a microcosm, in a bubble, they can hang with any team in this conference. And it's, as you said, a conference that's going to kind of cannibalize itself throughout the non-conference slate. Anybody can really beat anybody. I mean, look at Wyoming. And this is a true road test for UNLV. This is one of their first true road tests of the year in a mostly hostile environment. And it's also, you got to avoid the look-ahead angle because of the game later this week, still on the road against Colorado State. There's all the travel logistics that go along with it. You can't think about that. You got to keep tonight in focus and go against a really tough, really big, really well-coached team. Leon Rice has done phenomenal things in Boise, and I think UNLV can take advantage of certain matchups, to be sure.
Yeah, they get 3 of the hardest road assignments in the first 5 games because CSU on a Friday night will be, I assume, I think the last game I saw there was Boise, and there was Boise at Colorado State, and there was probably 6,000 in that gym that holds probably 5,000. I think the gym holds like 7,500. But yeah, this one's going to be tough tonight as well. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a really close game. It's going to come down to a couple of plays, and I know this sounds cliche, but that is what these games have been. Is UNLV at times will fall behind, they'll fight back into it. The pace is such a grinder pace that it doesn't get out of the 50s or 60s, which allows UNLV to stick around. But like I said, the one thing missing from the previous Boise teams has been a guy who generally came up with a key play or two in the final 2 minutes of this rivalry, and that was Marcus Shaver. So we talked about last week the recruiting weekend that was on the way that just passed. I saw you talking to one of our buddies, and I heard you throw out there, man, do they get everyone that they bring onto campus for visits?
That's what it seemed like. I mean, anyone that we see on social media or whatever saying, oh, UNLV is hosting so-and-so this weekend. 2 days later, so-and-so is committed to UNLV. So I don't know what kind of magic formula on these recruiting trips Barry Odom and his staff have. But it is, whatever it is, it's worked. I want to try it. I've got some eligibility left. Steve, what do you think?
I don't think they'll take you. I think they're very selective, putting kids into the portal and taking them out. Maybe in the past when you're in your prime. So let's start on defense first, because I talked last week about a big kid, 6'3", 290, veteran defensive lineman from the Ivy League, coming in for a visit in Clay Patterson, and they got him. And this is one of the things we talked about over the last couple of podcasts about this 3-3-5 defense really needs, especially on first down and then run situations, giant, plug guys, fire hydrants in the middle of that line. I don't know if that's where Big Clay is going to play, but this is a big land because it sets up the rest of the defensive line.
Certainly. And he's gonna anchor that line. And we kind of saw it at the end of this past season. We really didn't see it as much in the non-conference slate and then the early part of the conference schedule when UNLV was rolling. But on the defensive side of the ball, not having that plug in the middle of that 3-man defensive line really made a big difference. And for UNLV to do what they did last year, just to be kind of middle of the pack defensively with not a lot of scheme fits, it was really incredible kind of looking back now that we have some context to kind of see what the 3-3-5 can look like at other places. We've seen it at San Diego State for years and years and years. That was because they were able to recruit specifically for that look. And I think that a lot of the defensive transfers that Mike Shearer and Barry Odom have been bringing in have been perfect scheme fits. And it's guys, like we said, with Clay Patterson, that can be the middle anchor of the three-man defensive line. They've got two really athletic linebackers coming out of Power 5 programs in Arkansas and Oregon. And then just looking at the list, 5 defensive backs, including 4 Power 5 guys, actually 4 SEC guys. In New Mexico State, Jeremiah Vessel, who's one of the most athletic defensive backs in the country when it comes to a nickelback type of look. So I think that with the guys that they are going after on the defensive side of the ball, they're scheme fits. And, there's something to be said about taking an athlete or, you just have a stud at one position doing one specific thing, but we're seeing a well-rounded approach to bringing some of these guys out of the portal. And anybody that comes in out of high school this year, a true freshman, will be a welcome addition. And they've got to play like a stud to get there. But I think with a lot of these guys they're bringing in very specific roles. And I think that it's going to amount to the defense being a lot more well-rounded. They were pretty good against the run last year. They were pretty bad against the pass. The one area in the passing game, though, that I will say that they did perform better than expected, and especially towards the end of the year, was in man-on-man assignment football. And whether or not that was in the passing game or the running game, that was one area where they did well. When they went to zone, that's when they started to have some issues because people would have to overcompensate and give up area and give up ground on their side of the field. But we're seeing a lot of these, as I said, scheme fits coming in, and it's going to allow them to play some different styles and some different looks on defense for sure.
Yeah, Patterson on the D-line, and I assume they're going to add some more defensive linemen. And then you've got kind of tweener linebacker, guys that just landed in Manny Powell, who had Arkansas connections, and Jaden Navarrete, who's a Norco, California dude from Oregon. And again, it seemed like really quick turnarounds from their visits to their commits. So they got more size there. I didn't mention Antonio Doyle, who's 6'4", 260, and from Jackson State and Texas A&M. And then there was the excitement about Tony Grimes, a cornerback who played at North Carolina, went to Texas A&M, didn't get playing time there because he got hurt. And at one point, he was the number 2 prospect in the state of Arkansas, and I think top 200 overall. So you can see the upside here, the Power 5 experience. And to your point, I think the thing they performed worst at, and they shorted up for a couple of games here and there, but defending against the deep shot, what they had last year with chunk plays and also game-changing plays that turned into touchdowns, that you can't get better if that continues to happen. So they're putting a real premium on those safeties and cornerbacks, and I bet you they bring in several more cornerbacks to provide more competition.
Oh, and the defensive backfield was the glaring weakness of this team last year. Offensively, powerhouse, both passing and running, leading scoring team in the Mountain West Conference. They did a good job of stopping the run. All things considered, the front 6, front 7, if you want to include that nickel back in there, did a pretty darn good job of holding the line of scrimmage and not allowing big chunk plays in the run game. But yeah, like you said, they got burned over the top way more often than they should. But it was because they had guys that weren't necessarily in a great fit. Jere Williams being out for the majority of the year, especially in the later half of the season, really hurt them. So I think that Jeremiah Vessel, who is expected to compete for a starting spot at that nickelback role, could be a huge difference maker in stepping up in the run game and stepping back in the passing game and playing almost as a third safety. If they're able to really step up the safety play, and they have with some of these transfers, including the guy out of Texas and the guy out of Arkansas, they really give themselves a great opportunity, because this defense, Steve, if the offense performs anything like they did last year, and we'll get to the offense as well, because I think they're doing a great job of recruiting for a scheme fit. If the defense can be pretty good, there's no reason this team can't win the Mountain West Conference. This defense, as much as everyone would love it to be, a stalwart, lockdown, phenomenal, with the way the offense is and the amount of time that the offense takes typically with the ball, this defense just needs to be pretty good to give this team a really legitimate shot to get that not only Mountain West championship, Steve, we're talking about a college football playoff berth starting this year.
Yeah. Well, I will say I think they're going to be a better team, but I said it during the season last year, right after the season, that they're going to be better all over the field. But let me hold judgment on that one. I want to see both of the quarterbacks, and we'll get to the commit of Matthew Sluka in a couple minutes, but I I think they will be better almost everywhere on the field, but their schedule is going to be tougher. And keep in mind, the schedule is not set yet either, because
Yeah, a lot
that
of moving parts there.
Army game goes bye, and then we're still kind of in a weird zone with at Houston and at Kansas. Are they going to play them? Are they not going to play them? What's going to happen?
I'll be interested to see, because Barry Odom has been aggressive in just about every part of his tenure here at UNLV. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another big game added. They're not afraid. And don't forget also the home slate next year in conference is phenomenal. Just off the top of my head, they've got both Boise State and San Diego State, who's going to be improved, coming to Allegiant Stadium, where I am right behind me. And they play Reno in Las Vegas at the end of the year, so that's going to be a big one. They've got a chance for some really big home games as well.
No doubt. So I mentioned Matthew Sluka. So he comes in for a visit, Holy Cross kid, actually Long Island originally, and then prepped in New Jersey, and then lands in Worcester, Mass. Basically starts 3 of the 4 years, 3,600 yards on the ground, and he was one of the guys I kind of targeted. I have to go back and look at the poll question and who I put up there, but I know he was one of the 4 that I targeted the day that Maeva finally went into the portal. And I'm like, hey, who do you want to grab out of the portal? And Sluka was on that list. And, like I said on a bunch of these podcasts, I just figured I would target guys who could run a little bit. And in Sluka's case, a lot of it, because it just seems to match what Brennan Marion wants to in the go-go. And, interestingly enough, I actually think that UNLV could have been in on more quarterbacks who were in on the portal and had a really good chance. But I'm guessing that Sluka was one of Brennan Marion's favorite.
It has to be. And I don't know if you've seen highlights. I saw a highlight reel posted by Matt Sluka himself on social media. I'm bought in. The kid's freaky athletic. I mean, some of the movements that he was making with the ball and in the passing game as well, just in the pocket, being able to slide around a little bit. He's got some natural instinct with the ball in his hands, which is something we talked about it on the last one of these podcasts that we did. Nothing against Jaden Maeva, but he's not a natural runner with the ball. You could tell in some instances that he was very uncomfortable and very indecisive in the option game. Matt Sluka looks like he was born with a football right here. He was ready to go, and then they taught him how to pass. I mean, he is really athletic. He throws the deep ball very well, which is one of the 3 main tenets of this go-go offense. And they don't need him to run for 1,200 yards. The fact that he's able to is amazing. And they'll take whatever production they can get in the running game out of him. But all that they need out of a guy like him in this offense is to be able to make the right decision, to be able to read defenses well and quickly, and then to be able to secure the ball a little bit better than they had last year with the quarterback in the option game. And I think he's 3 for 3 on all of those. I'm bought in, at least from what I've seen on tape and from what we've seen on social media.
And the competition is going to be crazy, because I think there's high hopes for Haj Malik Williams. And we still don't know the status of Doug Brumfield. Does he stay with the program? Does he shut it down for a year to get healthier? Does he go elsewhere, right? So we're going to find out, I'm sure. We'll find out after the spring, because remember, this portal craziness is not over. Players can still go into the portal if they're grad transfers right now. They can also go into the portal if they're on pace to graduate in May at UNLV. And then the portal opens back up on May 1st to May 15th. And I'm sure there's going to be more movement. What's crazy, and I guess I should have expected this. I'm actually a little bit surprised there has been this much action around UNLV football. But I mean, what to you would suggest that Barry Odom looked at the end of the season and saw his team lose the final 3 games and have some of their deficiencies uncovered? Like, what would suggest to you that Odom's like, we're only going to turn over like 12 guys on the roster? Nope, it's going to be another one. I think it's going to be another one of those cases where it could be upwards of 30. Right, and he's got what does he have coming in? 22 freshmen or 23 freshmen too? So
something like that. I mean, with that in mind, the movement's just beginning as far as player personnel, and nothing about what Barry Odom has done so far has led me to believe that he's not going to be as aggressive as anybody in the conference. He has been so fun to watch, just personally getting to know him a little bit and seeing his style of coaching, but then to see his expectations for himself and for this program. are just they haven't been there since John Robinson 20 years ago. And it's kind of the flavor of college football, and he is more dialed in than a lot of coaches, especially those that have not had a prior head coaching experience in power programs. So Barry Odom playing the game and doing it especially well in a program that's never really had thoughts like this. There's never really had to worry about stuff like this, and he is doing unprecedented things here for this UNLV program. I wanted to get your thoughts, Steve, on you brought up Brumfield. I thought it was interesting how they did use him in the last couple of games in the receiver role. What are your thoughts about a potential position change for Brumfield? Because the main issue for him has been injury. And there is something to be said about, as a ball carrier, if you're a wide receiver catching a pass over the middle, you are able to brace yourself for contact a little bit more than a quarterback getting blindsided in the pocket. But for a guy who's had head and neck injuries, guy that's had knee problems, what do you think about a potential position change? Because he is freaky athletic, especially with the ball in his hands, more so than other quarterbacks on the West Coast.
Yeah, I don't think it happens.
I really don't either, and I don't think it happens. Bring it up, but
we've talked about this with Caleb Herring, that quarterbacks have a quarterback mentality, and very few can kind of give up being a quarterback. And that was a poor description. I think you work all that time to be a quarterback. You don't want to just give up your skill set and have to go out to receiver or a tight end, which I think is kind of a crazy suggestion for a guy who's 6'6" and 215. Now, I think Brumfield's got two choices, and I mentioned the third is leaving, but I think his first decision is he going to play football anymore because he's been beat up the last 2 years, and then the second is, can I actually fight for the starting job at this program? I think if he's 100% healthy, yeah, he can fight for it. I think it'd be weird if they brought in Sluka and they brought in Haj Malik and then Brumfield wins the job. So, the other thing, I'll ask you, you don't think Odom would do all of this, right? Bring in all these players and all these Arkansas tie guys, and now get a kid from the East Coast to trust him and come cross country to potentially be the starting quarterback in Matthew Sluka. You don't think he would do all this and then in like a 4-day turnaround go somewhere else? Because there are still job situations out there. The Arizona job was filled, and we'll get to that. But what happens when Michigan opens? And I'm not saying Barry Odom is getting the Michigan job, but what happens if whoever fills the Michigan job is kind of a mid-level, Big 12, or I doubt SEC, but then what? Then Odom's, are they going to make a run at Odom? Like Arizona might have at least inquired.
Yeah, well, like in that example specifically, that would be a step downward for Barry Odom in terms of athletic program, in terms of commitment from above, just with Arizona and a lot of the issues that they've had on the financial side of things recently. But there is something to be said about those big offers, and every coach is in a different scenario. When I was at App State, Scott Satterfield was the head coach, and he was an App State alum. They had brought them to back-to-back 10-win seasons, and then all these jobs opened up. The Louisville job opened up, which is where he still is, and he took that job, and it was kind of a, hey, you have to take this opportunity. And then the very next year, they brought in Elijah Drinkwitz from outside. He had no ties to Appalachian State. He had a young family, brought them in, ho-hum another 10-win season, and then an SEC school in Mizzou comes calling, and he triples his salary after 1 year of coaching. Now, in that specific instance, in both of those scenarios, it made sense for those guys to go. For Satterfield, who had been at his alma mater for a long time, had brought them about as high as he could get them, especially with the Sun Belt being as, I'll say, lower profile as it is as a conference compared to the Mountain West or some other group of 5 conferences. And then the next year, Elijah Drinkwitz comes in, does a phenomenal job for 1 year. He was never really going to be a long-term option, leaves for the SEC and triples his salary for his young family. Those made sense. For Barry Odom to leave right now, I don't think it makes sense for him. And I mean, we both have developed a relationship with him. We don't, we're not the best of friends. I don't pretend to know Barry Odom super, super well, but with what we've gotten to learn, first and foremost, he's a man of integrity. And I, more so than most other college coaches in the country, have learned that we can take him for his word. And I think that goes a long way. And that's part of the reason why a lot of these guys are coming and visiting and committing 2 days later. Yeah. But for right now, I brought up those Appalachian State examples. I don't think it makes sense for him to leave. Now, if they do what they did last year again this year, and they've got a lot of these short-term plays, a lot of these grad transfers coming in, and let's just say best case scenario, they win the Mountain West, they go to the 12-team college football playoff as the number 12 seed. Then it's a completely different scenario. There's going to be some more jobs opening up next year, but I don't think that it makes sense for him to leave for a different job at this point.
Right. And the job I was thinking of is Matt Campbell in Iowa State, if the Michigan job opens. So I don't know what Michigan's going to do. It seems like Harbaugh going through the NFL interviews would kind of have him leaning towards the NFL, but who the hell knows how this is all going to finish up. What'd you think of Brent Brennan getting the Arizona job?
Well deserved. And San Jose State has always been a dangerous team, always been a well-coached team. And I think for a guy like that, it does make sense to make that leap. Because, I mean, you want to talk about a school where the financial commitment to the football program hasn't always been ideal. You're coming from San Jose State. And, there's money up there, and you've been up there. The campus is interesting. The financials of the athletic department are interesting. So it's nothing new for him.
The basketball arena is interesting. It is a high school gym, which is amazing that they've had some winning seasons, and Miles has actually built it up pretty decently. I think it's a great hire. I think Arizona fans just don't know who he is. I've seen a lot of them complaining and saying stuff like, "Oh, back to mediocre recruiting and a 6-6 seasons." Like I think if there's not major money issues, and I know they're like, oh, the school is over like $200 million in debt. And maybe that's why Jed Fish is off. So maybe I shouldn't even say this. If there aren't major funding issues that would affect the Arizona football program, then I think Brent Brennan is smart to take the job. And he's a good recruiter. You know where he's really good? In the transfer portal. He's also a quarterback whisperer, so that Arizona will become a quarterback school. And maybe there's a chance. Brent Brennan, I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like old guy cheesy. I think he's very relatable. He's very much a player's coach. And I have no idea if Jed Fish has already told Fafita, let's go, we're going north. But if he wants to stay at Arizona, I think they picked a good coach, an offensive guru who's had a lot of success with quarterbacks. So I like the hire, and I'll tell you what, I want to see what San Jose State does, because I think there's a lot of people around the conference, the other programs who were like, they just lost a really good one. Can they replace him? Are they going to get someone that level who's as good as Brent Brennan? I'm not so sure.
No, especially with how long he had been there. And I think there's something to be said to your point about the recruiting and the transfer portal prowess of Brennan, especially on the West Coast. And I think regionally it makes a big difference to bring in a guy in Arizona who has those recruiting ties, especially to California, especially to Northern California, which is a sneaky, underrated recruiting ground for especially high school guys. There's a lot of guys that develop especially well coming out of Northern California, and Brent Brennan's got those recruiting trails. So yeah, I think it's a good hire for a program that is kind of come from nothing to a really, really good team. Jed Fish deserves every bit of the promotion that he got, and it'll be interesting to see, like you said, what staff-wise he brings. But and it'll be interesting to see how the pieces fall in the Mountain West, because if San Jose State gets the hire right, and they stay as a top competitive team in the conference, it's like basketball. They're going to cannibalize themselves as a conference. But if they want to go long-term in a developmental play, that opens it up for schools like UNLV and schools like Boise State at the top of the conference to continue a dominant run.
I would also keep an eye out for the roster, and because I know they have some Vegas guys, so there could be some more transfer portal opportunities there. Terrible thing to talk like that, but that's the way it goes. And UNLV has had some players stolen off their roster, so let me throw this one at you. Marcus Arroyo is the OC at Arizona State. He's a San Jose State guy, former quarterback and a grad. If they came to him and they can at least match his salary at Arizona State, would he turn his back after 3 weeks on the job on Arizona State and take the San Jose State job? And do you think that's a good hire?
See, that's tough because, for Arroyo personally, I should say, every coach wants to be a head coach, especially at the college game. Everyone has an idea of how they would build a program, what kind of identity they would instill, and how their coaching style would be. That's a really, really tough decision. And if you're San Jose State, you look at kind of what he did what Arroyo did at UNLV in terms of the Mountain West Conference. And if UNLV had not gotten rid of Marcus Arroyo, it was a program slowly but on the rise. They were on the rise at the very least. I don't think that they would have necessarily doubled their win total from last year to this year like they did under Barry Odom, but he had the program headed in the right direction. It was a little bit slower than the school and the program would have liked, but he did have some buy-in. He's got the West Coast recruiting ties. He's got the offensive prowess in terms of play calling and play design. And like you mentioned with Brent Brennan, Arroyo has been very, very good with quarterbacks, namely Justin Herbert. He did some pretty good things with him at Oregon. I think it would depend on how much Arroyo wants to get back to that region of the country.
Right. And
it's an interesting scenario because Arizona State right now as a program is not very good.
What's a better path? Say 4 years total at Arizona State and maybe something bigger than Arizona State and a lot of success running the offense. Does that rehab you better, or do you jump right back to Group of Five and give it a go with, frankly, lesser facilities than the job you got fired from? And I've already given up my feelings on Arroyo. I think he was headed in the right direction. I think some things had to change behind the scenes in terms of communication, but his roster was headed in the right direction. I think he's a pretty good coach. Does he deserve a second chance? Probably. So I don't know. In some ways, I think being the hotshot OC recruiter and running a bang-up offense is actually a better rehab than going right back to Group of Five and trying to fix maybe some of the mistakes you made in your 3-year gig.
I tend to agree with that. That line of thinking makes sense to me, especially at a program in Arizona State where you got some money. They've got national name recognition more so than San Jose State, especially once you get into the bowl season, and you've got a little bit of an edge in the recruiting game. I mean, it's got to be easier to get guys to Tempe than it is to San Jose State, just for a lot of reasons, for the facilities, for the weather, for the programs themselves. So yeah, I tend to agree with you that the coaching rehab cycle that we've seen, especially from a head coach to an offensive coordinator and then getting back up there, has been very fortuitous for a lot of guys. I mean, you look at the Nick Saban school of coaching rehab, the offensive coordinators that he ran through Alabama all those years, and now that you've got guys all over. It's a who's who of college football coaches. So there's something to be said there about that. I also just think it's so funny that it's they call it coaching rehab, because that kind of is what it is, especially for those guys at Alabama, like Bill O'Brien and Lane Kiffin. It was like, hey, I'm going to get you back on your feet. I'm going to get you stable. I'm going to get you another job and make sure that I follow up with you after the fact. So it's a pretty good equivalent. But back to our point about Arroyo, I tend to agree with you that a 4 years of really good offensive coordinating and recruiting at a program like Arizona State would probably serve him better in the long run than 2 to 3 years of coaching as the head coach at a Group of Five school like San Jose State.
Game tonight, Boise State and UNLV will be on with Runnin Rebel warm-up at 6:30 Pacific, 7 o'clock tip. Game is on. I don't have it in front of me. I'm almost positive it's FS1.
Stand by. I have
you can check it
Rob
out there.
Whaley's page pulled up, but I'll hit the schedule. I believe it's FS1.
Yes. It is. No, it's CBS Sports Network.
They pulled it.
Thank God we checked. And Boise right now is a 5.5-point favorite. They're 12-4, and UNLV is 8-7. It's always interesting looking at the lines and how close they are around the conference from the team I perceive the best in the conference against a team that right now just hasn't had many breaks and hasn't made its breaks in some close games and could have a better record than 8-7. All right, we'll close it. This was a good one on a Tuesday. Matt, I appreciate it. I'll see you, buddy.
Yep, bundle up, Steve. Enjoy it.